On this episode of Clone Talk.
Some of our initial trials in 2022, we were able to showcase varieties from seed that showed above 90%, above 95 in some cases, percent uniformity plant to plant. What we do in our facility is every single mother plant gets tested twice individually before it reaches its cutting stage. And it needs to pass clean bill of health twice before we start cutting it. But most people are using anywhere from 20 to 30% of their canopy as veg. And what if that 30% was now more grams of weed produced per year out of your facility, right?
Hey team, Clone Coach here. Are you tired of struggling with your clones? Slow rooting times, purple stems, yellow growth, damping off, and so much more. Now, wherever you are in the world, the best tool to have in your nursery are the Clone Coach SOPs. These SOPs provide step-by-step instructions and expert guidance to get you the best clones ever. Join the team today at clonecoach.com. On today's episode, we have Elan joining us. How are you, Elan?
I'm doing well. Staying dry. Sunny out today.
Yeah, we were just chatting before we hit record that, this big storm hitting California right now is affecting everybody. So it obviously affected your operation as well, right?
Yeah, no, it was a hell of a run with all the rain and pumping water out, and got everything all dialed now. So back on track.
Nice. So where are you calling in from today? Where are you based out of?
Right now I'm in our Salinas office. We have two locations in the coastal region here, one in Watsonville, Santa Cruz County, and then our Salinas facility here in Monterey.
Nice, man. Nice. Well, I know you've been in the industry for a while and stuff, but let's get back to like the early days. Like, when did cannabis become a part of your life kind of for good?
Yeah, so I actually got into cannabis when I was in high school, when I was 14 and a half, 15. Some of my best friends in high school, one friend in particular, his dad had a facility up in Redwood Valley, Mendocino, and we were fortunately spoiled by the days of Blue Dream and Purple Flow and all the old cuts that were going around. And every summer we'd go up there and trim and make a little money, maybe bring some weed down, hustle it on the streets, or just get cashed out. So that was kind of like initially, got lucky to meet a buddy who had a place up in Mendo and got right into the heart of it back in the day. And then, so through high school, just kind of growing casually. It wasn't like a lifelong thing. And I'd say, after that, I got into commercial horticulture and was growing mixed vegetables, orchard crops in Santa Cruz. I went to UC Santa Cruz and was studying agronomy over here and got into, organic production at scale and also permaculture and that whole, model of sustainable living and going beyond just farming, but also building communities and stuff like that. And really found my calling for farming and food when I was in high school, and then got to cultivate that in college. And then after grad, I wasn't really doing much weed stuff in college at the time. I was really more focused on like vegetables and ornamental horticulture, stuff like that. And then when I graduated, I ended up getting a job in Hawaii on Maui. And so I was working out there, growing ginger and turmeric mostly. So in the herbs, but
Nice.
different kind of herbs, more medicinal stuff, and was growing ginger and turmeric commercially for a few years there. And then ended up moving back here in 2016. And that was kind of right as Prop 64 was launching, and been in it commercially ever since then.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a solid background, man. All that commercial ag background, hands-on, first person view of all that commercial ag, man, studying it and, breathing it, living it, working it. That's an amazing background. Yeah. And around 2016, I think, is when we started to kind of, chat here and there, 2017 and stuff, 2016, just being in the nursery space and just trying to, get to know everybody in the space, that's trying to put their best foot forward. So during those early years, I mean, in your teen years, you had that direct access almost to, the farms, the real farms of back in the day, which is awesome. But during that middle stage or at any point in time like that, did you get any negative effects from cannabis propaganda around you, or was, people you're surrounded with were okay with it, or was there some challenges?
It was interesting when I first started smoking and kind of being in the scene in high school. I was kind of a unique situation where actually my uncle who's Dr. Alan Frankel, who passed away in the last year. He was one of the leading researchers in CBD and kind of minor cannabinoids, THCV, and he was way ahead of his time. He had been studying CBD for 25 years, really before it hit, commercial and medical really blew up. So I actually had like a medical cannabis script when I was 16. And so I was going into like Berkeley Patients Group. I grew up in the Bay Area, and people were like looking at me like, this guy's a little young to be in here. But I ended up having a medical script when I was pretty young. My family at the time was more progressive. My parents are from the 60s era, so they were, not opposed to it. And our house was the one that all the friends would come over to and blaze it. So we were fortunate to not be stigmatized at home, really, coming from a pretty progressive family. But, just I think really most of the like stigmatism and propaganda, I guess not propaganda, more the stigmatism, I think I felt it more like when we started doing things in like 2015 and 16, when we were going commercial, had acre greenhouses before it really started taking off like that. And, we had to kind of keep a little more hush hush. Obviously, I had little projects before that back in the day, but it was more cutty and small, so we didn't really have to feel like those effects. But I feel like I felt it more like right when we were beginning this project in Watsonville, and could just get some insight from the neighbors and people kind of feeling weary about it. So, but I feel overall I've been fortunate to be surrounded by a progressive family and not feeling oppressed at home for growing or smoking weed. So
That's super interesting. I mean, how many? You mentioned your uncle. What was his name again?
Alan Frankel, Dr. Alan Frankel.
That's so. How many people were having their medical card under the age of 18? Ever? I guess even right. I mean, because that's got to be a fairly small number.
Yeah, I think I was fortunate enough to have that opportunity. I did have some pretty serious issues with insomnia and sleep when I was pretty young and getting in my head. And I did start using cannabis medicinally to go to sleep. Pretty quickly, it turned recreationally, obviously, but it helped me go to sleep. And I was trying sleeping pills. I had issues with those and all these negative side effects. And my parents were like, "Hey, this is a healthier way of doing it, and doesn't have all the negative side effects of big pharma, right?" So that worked for me. Yeah, I mean, as far as like propaganda, stigmatism, back to that, like my uncle was, I would say oppressed by the system at large. He had his medical license taken away from him. He was conducting research and was really pushing the limits before his time. Eventually, it all came around. He got his license back, doing work with UCLA, and it really took off. But yeah, I feel like just really trying to carry his spirit of initiative and pushing the limits on what's possible with this plant as a medicinal product for people.
Yeah, that's a good point of view because, like, even we say, yeah, we were stigmatized as patients or even advocates or just for speaking about it, but to conduct research, there still isn't research being done on a normal, consistent basis, right? So to be a pioneer in research and have something like your medical license at risk and being affected and stuff like that is being affected, by the negative, stigmatism attached, which is, unfortunate. But hats off to every single pioneer, right? That's just like, no, this is what's right, and in their lifetime, they feel like that's what they want to put their energy and efforts into. And that's like, how could you not applaud that, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you nailed it.
Yeah. So let's switch it on over to like the beginning of your medical career. You're touching base on 26, not your medical career. I'm sorry, your professional career. You're touching base on 2016 is when you came back from Hawaii, right? And you were ready to fill up some greenhouses and get things going. So what was the beginning of that professional career? What did it evolve to? We got a little sense of what it was like. How did it take off from there?
Yeah, so basically when I came back from Hawaii, I was still pretty gung-ho about growing ginger and turmeric. And so I brought that business back to Watsonville, and through an old high school friend, made a connection with a project near where I lived. And I was able to lease some greenhouse space out there. And I was really to grow vegetables, cucumbers, tomatoes, ginger and turmeric were the cash crops for me at the time. But then quickly learned, hey, these guys are growing some weed. The market's about to take off. So I was actually work trading for my lease to grow vegetables by helping them grow weed and pruning and working on the ground level. pretty quickly within a year plus, it turned into like, all right, this is now the new cash crop. Obviously, let's focus on this. We still kept growing some of the tomatoes for another year or so, but the cannabis game just kind of became the dominant focus. And I was working with a company called Strong Agronomy Management, the brand that's most now widely known as Coastal Sun. Organic cannabis. Definitely want to make a huge plug for them. They've been a huge part of my growth and career into what is now Refined Genetics for me, but still have strong ties and want to hugely support Coastal Sun. But yeah, so I was working there as kind of the site manager, operations, cultivation, doing everything from fixing pipes, putting in irrigation systems, hoop houses, renovating old structures that were for roses back in the day, hiring people, growing the team to 100 plus people, and really found my passion and love in the nursery space. Commercially, just really saw that that void, and just seeing how this market has grown and established. In any agricultural market, you see specialization occur, right? Especially at scale. Not a single operation can do everything very, very well. I think in the beginning of the cannabis industry, all these companies raised a bunch of money, trying to be vertically oriented, integrated, and to just do everything from A to Z, and which sounds great, but I think people quickly realize, hey, you know what? We're actually really good at this one part of it, or really good at that part of it. And from the beginning, I was like, hey, I really enjoy this nursery process. I think it's its own business, its own P&L in a huge way. So yeah, just from my love and passion for vegetative propagation, that cycling, just focused on that. And then came Coastal Star at the time, which was part of the Strong Agronomy Network, and was working there, building that nursery up for 3 years. And then through a series of events, it made sense for me to branch out and kind of start my own nursery with the new partners, which became Refined Genetics. And now we've grown that to be its own beast.
Perfect transition there. Because we're going to transition right into what your current role is. So what's your current role with Refined Genetics? And at a high level, what does Refined Genetics do or provide?
Yeah, so I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Refined Genetics. We are a genetic development company, so we breed varieties and bring them to market. We have 160,000 square feet of greenhouse production. Some of it's light assist, some of it's just sun-grown. So we raise everything from seeds, seedlings, clones, and teens, pretty much anything nursery, plant propagation, asexual or sexual propagation, we're doing it. A big part of our business is also breeding at scale. A little bit different than pollen chuck in little containers and indoors. We have a PhD breeder on staff who his previous work was with seedless watermelons. His name is Chris Hone. And so we've really tried to make a stronger effort toward breeding for a stable seed. And that's, a much longer arc of development. It can take 4 to 6, 10 plus years to develop stable seed varieties. So half of our business is focused on seed and seed development, and the other half is clones and teens.
Fantastic. Yeah, you got to play the long game, right? We're at the inception of this industry, this global industry, right? And with global trade and everything else, we're at the inception of it. So 5 years to create stable lines that could go into mass productions for decades, it's a fraction of time when you really take a step back, right? So it's amazing work because all that research and development, that's true resources and time and effort that it takes before you get anything in return. So it's very difficult to do.
The R&D side of the budget is it's always a negative, right? You're spending money on R&D. It's not necessarily returning you dollars right away. We dedicate almost 20 to 25% of our greenhouse space to R&D, seed development, breeding work. So at any given time, we'll have tens of thousands of square feet in the breeding work, which costs money. But again, we're putting all of our work, all of our profits from the plant production right back into variety improvement, genetic development to continue our process for many years to come.
Fantastic. Yeah, we're going to that's going to be the next subject we're going to dive right into is genetic seeds and breeding. Kind of your point of view on, what things used to be like and where things are now and where you think things are headed in the future for, genetics and seed production and breeding itself. So let's dive into that. Where are your thoughts on where things used to be and kind of bring where things are now?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a great depth of history that I wouldn't necessarily know all the details on, dating back to when people really started initially growing cannabis. But I think before commercialization, before this market really blew up, everybody had their seed library or their small clonal selections that they were maintaining. Everything's in house, generally small scale production. People are able to contain with what they're doing with limited contamination and limited effect on others in the industry or nationwide, globally. And as commercialization has come along, production has gone up. Facilities are producing more than they ever have, whether it's in-house. You have scaled nurseries like ours who are growing plants, transferring them to other facilities. So now this network has become this huge web. People are trading genetics, trading seeds. It's just relatively a free-for-all. Yeah, it's a regulated market, but it's a free-for-all. There's genetics flying everywhere, compared to things like corn and the rest of agriculture where there's like actual patents and variety protection. Breeders in those markets, they don't share their breeding stock. They don't really share much. It's all hybrid, patented stuff that's protected. They're lobbying, they're protecting their varieties. That's their whole business model. So that's not really where cannabis is even at yet. But now, as the industry is maturing, it's still, in my eyes, it's still this great free for all. But you're starting to see companies say, hey, wait, maybe we don't want to just give our genetics out to everybody. Maybe we want to have a little more control. Maybe we want to license some varieties to people at different states or whatever. And so I think things are graduating to a new level of, hey, how are we going to make this work and set ourselves apart with unique varieties, new flavors, agronomic traits, flower traits, hash rosin, that. Now the list of the boxes you can check for what makes a variety good is longer and longer and longer, right? But there's still just this massive web of names of varieties. And, when you start narrowing it down, how many really distinct varieties are there? How much of it's really just some gelato or runts or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So that's, I think, where kind of we're at right now is this big mishmash of hundreds, thousands of names of varieties that are somewhat more similar than people are giving them credit for. Yeah, there's some definitely variety in there, batch to batch. You see weed looks different, and it comes down to branding, quality of growing, and your ability to bring it to market as what's going to gain popularity. I think where it's heading is more work on the breeding side, people protecting their varieties, licensing their varieties, collecting data that's useful for growers and for consumers. I think, how to make your variety stand out. Yeah, you can get influencers to jump behind it, but what's going to make a difference to a producer or grower might mean a little more. Hey, how much is it going to yield? What's my flowering time? What's the hash rosin yields? Show me 4 or 5 different labs that tested it. What's the COA like? Show me 4 or 5 different labs that tested that at spring, summer, fall, and winter. So all that data collection takes time. But as that rolls out, that's what's going to really boost value behind the varieties is, hey, does this work for your production? And if it's in something new, you got to prove it to me, right? You got to trial it out and you got to prove it to me.
Yeah, it's a very good point.
Yeah.
I mean, because all those boxes you were talking about checking off, everybody, the end users had different uses for those products. And ideally, I was speaking with somebody else earlier, like ideally, they have an idea of what they want to do with the product. They don't have to go through a process at the very end of their harvest and say, oh, well, now we're going to pivot because, we made XYZ mistake. So if you have that linear kind of, strategy, we're like, no, I'm making hash rosin, and that's the genetics I need to hit those numbers for my end use, right? Or, hey, you know what? I'm in a climate that's, really susceptible to mold. So I really need a really disease resistant variety because I just can't lose my crop, to disease, So if you know your endpoints and stuff, then that's where the work, like you described, the breeders are doing to really stabilize, to really start to, and within there, obviously there's options and variety, but that's super important. So what are some tips tips and tricks on facilities that want to be breeding, whether you're I would say big or small because you could do a lot. You can make a lot of seeds in a very small space. So it's kind of hard to say that company is a small breeder, but because you can make so much in a very little space. So for all breeders out there, I mean, what do you think would be some good knowledge to share?
I think it's really important to define what your objectives are. What exactly are you trying to achieve? What are your breeding goals? What are you trying to come with? Is it you're trying to make a new flower variety that's a clone variety? Or are you trying to make stable seed lines that when you pop 10,000 Gelato 41 from seed, they all look the exact same, right? Those are two very different goals with very different journeys along the way to get there. I think, one thing, I guess another tip would be, if you're doing breeding work or any R&D inside or next to a production facility where you're like, hey, we need to hit our numbers, we're producing flour or rosin or whatever it is, those are two very different flows that are going on. And it's important to isolate those activities and treat them separately and not try to conflate them in the same room or in the same flow, because they're going to have different outcomes. There's going to be different timelines with it. And if you want to get out of your breeding program or your genetic exploration activity what you want out of it, give it the time and the space that it really needs, and do it well. To half-ass, oh, let's throw a few of these in the room. We're going to try to get this. That might be, maybe if you have low goals or you only want to try a new variety out, that's fine. But give the R&D and the breeding the energy and time that it needs. Don't skimp on it if you're going to do it. I think for people who want to just dabble and try new varieties, everybody can do that. Everybody can pop seeds, hunt down a new cut. People can get new cuts from people, throw them into a room. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit there, right? But even within that, right, if you're, say you're popping 100 seeds, nothing huge, say you're popping 100 seeds, you're going to back them all up. You want to think about the time and the space that's going to take for the months that it's going to go to hold that stock, keep it clean, keep it viroid free, and how you're going to bring that into your production. Why is that variety going to be important to you? How is it going to help your brand? A lot of questions you can ask, right? But I think, again, it goes back to defining what your objectives are. What do you want out of your breeding project or your grow out? That's going to help your business or your personal home grow. Just helping understand what that is for you.
Set a clear goal and a clear path to get there. I love it. With intention, right? Like, do things with intention and make sure you're accomplishing exactly what you set out to accomplish, and don't let the time kind of derail you, because there will be a lot of time involved in the meantime. Let's transition a little bit into tissue culture. Let's dive into, tissue culture was few and far between back in the day, right? Like that's where I see it. Like, it was just few and far between. You would hear about it, but even then, amongst the crowd that was doing it, who knows the ratio of people or percentage of people that were doing things properly. So where's your kind of point of view on tissue culture, at a broad scope there?
Yeah, I mean, I think tissue culture or micropropagation of plants is a very powerful tool. It's a very important tool for breeding and for commercial plant propagation. I think that tool can be used in a variety of ways. It can be used for full plant propagation, right? You got businesses like Conception that and Finest, there's no mother plants, right? Everything's micropropagated all the way to the customer. Tissue culture can also be used to bank and house genetics and for a library in small amounts. You can have hundreds, thousands of varieties in test tubes and petri dishes, and hold varieties, in mass quantity. Yeah, and then for breeding, it can be a good tool. Instead of trying to keep everything in a greenhouse, you can have it all secure in a test tube, right? So I think it's a really important tool for at least the minimum for banking stock that's important to you. It's a very relatively inexpensive way to hold genetic material in a clean, secure fashion that's not going to be contaminated by, let's say, bugs and humans. Humans can still contaminate it even in culture, but it's less likely with the attention and the right SOPs in place. But even large-scale TC facilities can have contamination. It is possible if the training is wrong, or if something gets in there, and cultures can be contaminated as well. It's not this big vacuum. It's intended to be a vacuum, but there can be contamination even in culture. It's less likely, but it can be there. Regardless, it's important to have that clean stock to go back to, whether you're going to go from that right to your production, or you're going to go from that to mother stock and then cut your mother stock for your clones, for your production. It's a very important tool. Every nursery, or even someone who's keeping their stuff in house, I think should at least entertain, if not install, a small TC or micropropagation lab for themselves to have that security, instead of keeping big moms where you risk that contamination. There are drawbacks. There are challenges and constraints that come with culture. The time that it takes, right? It can take a little longer to get things rolled through it. But again, if you plan ahead and you are always putting stuff into culture, it's like the best time to plant a tree is 10 years ago, right? You want to start yesterday. We have time on our side. This industry ain't going anywhere. You want to start yesterday, so go ahead.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's a very powerful tool that nurseries and or production facilities should be utilizing.
What do you think the future of TC is? I mean, for the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think TC will be used to transfer material nationwide, internationally. You look at, again, other crops, they ship cultures internationally, right? You have to have contracts with governments and phytosanitary stuff, but it's a great way to move material in a clean phytosanitary condition. I think in the future, it'll also be a way to hold germplasm, keep stuff secure, to bank stuff that are clone onlys. I think it'll continue to use for mass propagation as well, like conception and other scale TC labs that are coming about. They were going to continue producing plants in that way.
I love it. Yeah, that's super great. I mean, the transportation of this internationally. I mean, yeah, why wouldn't you, cram as much genetic material as you can into the smallest space possible? You can move around as efficiently as possible. And in theory, I mean, if you don't have a full rooted plant, then you don't have to worry about watering and the condition extremes that the plant is facing. You could kind of, I guess in theory, put it in a cooler or something that insulates it, that keeps it a lot more stable and steady and doesn't require fertilizer, watering, every couple days or something. So that's a very good point. Are you a cannabis grower looking for reliable and accurate pathogen testing for your plants? Look no further than MyFlora DNA. Their state-of-the-art lab offers testing for hop latent viroid, fusarium, as well as other pathogens that can cause harm to your crops. Trust them to provide you the information that you need to ensure the health of your plants. And for a limited time, use discount code CloneCoach at checkout for up to 20% off your entire order. Don't let pathogens ruin your crop. Choose MyFlora DNA for all of your cannabis testing needs. Now back to the show. So with tissue culture, I mean, you want clean genetics and stuff, but with plants that are already in use and already, in rotation or, on their way into rotation or even coming out of tissue culture, right? Let's touch on hop latent viroid testing. So once again, what was things like before? I think right now it's on everybody's top list, right? The top of everybody's list, as it should be, so things weren't like this before, but let's get a little scope on hop latent viroid testing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think HLVD has been around before it's gotten as crazy as it has now. I've always seen people have seen dudded plants in their garden before and they pull them out. It's not at the scale and the effect that it has had now. And again, with mass propagation, protocols not being followed, not enough information about this virus coming out early on, the viroid is everywhere. It's everywhere. And having, there's no silver bullet for it. There's no one-stop shop for it. Even culture labs can carry HLV in there as well. I think tissue culture is a very powerful tool to eliminate and have clean material come through those programs, but it's not foolproof. Seed isn't foolproof. It can transfer through seed as well. Now, we have to, IPM isn't just what are you spraying on a calendar, right? Integrated pest management is, a breadth of cultural, mechanical, chemical controls that are utilized to support a plant production system or a farm. And so we have to employ, cultural tools would be the SOPs when people are coming through and cutting the plants, changing scissors every single plant, having the right sanitation between plants, having that knowledge be shared amongst everybody in the organization. They have to understand the impact that this virus and other plant diseases, not just HLV, but fusarium, mosaic viruses. We want to treat all these very seriously. So having those cultural practices in place. There are no known chemical treatments for plants that we know of yet to get rid of this viroid. So that makes it very difficult to manage that way. So really it's cultural and utilizing tissue culture and clean plant practices in the greenhouse or indoor facility to keep it at bay. As a facility as large as ours, I'd be standing here lying to say if we've never had HLV in our facility. I can't do that, right? We have had it in the facility in the last couple of years, and we've unknowingly sold plants to people that had it. And I feel terrible about it. We've gone out of our way to address those customers, offer discounts, free plants, supporting them, because we're not in this to just make money quick and get out. Like, we see our customers, our friends as partners in this, and their success is our success. And so,
Right.
Back to testing, right, as a really important tool for this, we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars annually on testing our mother stock, our plants in the system, teens, clones, and we've used a variety of different labs. And as of early this year, we actually installed our own in-house lab because of just the sheer number of samples we were doing to be able to get the turnaround time and also to control the protocol through the lab and conduct our R&D to know exactly what's going on. We started doing it ourselves. We still use third-party labs for verification to see, hey, are our results mirroring other ones? And a lot of people do that. They test with different labs. But the thing is, each lab maybe uses a different enzyme or a different SOP with how they're running their samples. There's not one way that everyone's doing it. So it's pretty common to get, a positive result here, a negative result there on the same tissue. And not going to name any names, but we've done this with a few different labs and seen an array of results. And so in-house, we've actually developed a few assays, an array of enzymes that we use that are extremely sensitive. And we've been able to send our results that we are known confirmed positives to other labs that we've received negative results from. Now, I don't want to say everybody go out and doubt your lab, don't freak out, but I think it's important to understand and to learn more about the processes that are happening from the moment you collect your sample, how you're doing that, the gloves you're using, the scissors, the protocols from plant to plant, all the way through the lab, all the way to the end. And so we've installed a set of robotics. We have really good protocols in the lab. We have highly trained people in there who've been doing this work for 10 plus years before cannabis. So we're really confident in our program, but we still use third parties to verify and not just be an island unto ourselves.
That's fantastic. Yeah, there's a lot of good tidbits in there on just keeping a standard, protocol for all those little details that, most people, it just skips them, right? Like, they won't consider that maybe people are using different, materials for, even down to their gloves, or what have you, So there's a lot of little nuances there. If you really want to have a control, test and a lab result, well, when it comes to that kind of stuff, there's got to be some sort of standardization across. So it's good that, you're, even advocating for multiple testing for multiple facilities just to probably once again, even just gather more data, right? Like, and even ask them, hey, what did you do on this particular step? And you could factor that into the result that you're receiving from them. So that's really huge right there. Where do you see the future of hop latent viroid itself and the testing and kind of, how it's affecting everybody's lives here and everybody's grows?
Yeah, I think part of the future of it on a commercial scale, at least, is going to be continued testing. I think there will be very soon, there will probably be governmental agencies and groups that come together to say, hey, this material needs to be certified clean stock, right? If you look at strawberries, you look at other high value agronomic crops, they've actually developed standards in the nursery industry that say, hey, if you want to sell this plant, you need to have this certified stamp of approval that, hey, this is clean, certified clean stock. So I think that is, it may take some years to get there, but I think that's coming. I think it's needed. I think on a grower level, if you're, producing stuff in house for yourself, I think it's important to also use your eyeballs. Know what the early signs of HLV look like in plants before you even go to testing. If you see plants that don't look right, pull them out. Whether or not it's HLV, you want to make sure all the plants in your facility are super healthy. You don't want to have stragglers because those are the ones that are probably going to get sick with HLV or mites or whatever first. You want to keep all your plants as healthy as possible, your nutrient program firing, your lighting on point. So, it comes to, a holistic lens of keep a nice, healthy, clean facility all around. And there's a lot you can do with just your senses without spending crazy money on lab testing. But I think that next step is, continue testing. What we do in our facility is every single mother plant gets tested twice individually before it reaches its cutting stage. And it needs to pass clean bill of health twice before we start cutting it. That comes at a great cost, right? That's a cost that we incur. I don't think most nurseries that are doing just traditional plant propagation are doing that. I hope more of them start to take on the spirit of that at least, or take on more testing. But I think it's crucially important to be testing plants through the facility to be able to show, hey, here's my customer. You want to see our testing results? I'm not just giving you one for this strain and one for that strain. Here's 200 results from this one batch of moms for the batch that you are buying. And then we're now going to start offering where we can test the actual clones that we're shipping out to people. Say, hey, let's take a sample of your clones. And why don't we send it to a third party? We'll pay for that too. That way it's not our lab, right? It's a third party lab that can verify that batch. We want to honor our customers. We want to honor the plant. We want our customers to be successful. So why take any shortcuts? Why go around it, right? We have to just aim right at this thing, clean it out of all these facilities everywhere. And then for us, it comes back to breeding, right? This is a longer arc, but we have identified certain varieties that don't necessarily show like a genetic resistance to the viroid, but can show tolerance. Some varieties can hold the viroid and show little to zero signs or symptoms in the plant and the flower, and hold tough. And we've tested plants that are in the field that are beautiful, healthy looking plants, yielding well, checking all the boxes, but might be positive for the viroid. And so, bring it back to the breeding program, what if we can develop varieties that are resistant or tolerant of the viroid and, kind of work with nature in that way? Because this viroid isn't just going to disappear, right? It's not going away completely. So we have to have these different tools in our toolbox to address it, and keep everything going.
Yeah, man, very, very good stuff there. Right before we move on to the next section here, what are these signs, since you handle so many vegetative plants at scale, and that's where you want to catch, the symptoms and signs of the viroid showing itself in its plant. What are some of the signs and symptoms somebody could look out for? Because it doesn't really matter what size garden you have. These are the similar symptoms that should express themselves. So what should people be looking out for when they're scouting for hop latent viroid?
Yeah, it can show itself in different ways with different varieties. Some of the most common things vegetatively, you'll see the plants will just look smaller, stunted. You'll see shorter petioles. You'll see the fan leaves won't expand to their fullest capacity compared to a healthy individual. The branches will be weak. They'll be leggier. Those are probably some of the most common things we see. For me, the biggest thing is just looking at the leaf expansion is almost the easiest way for me. If that leaf isn't opening up fully, naturally, that's usually a pretty clear sign. You'll see it as a whole branch, or usually the whole plant will show it if it's really bad. Some plants are completely asymptomatic, and that's the scary part, when you can't tell at all. And for some facilities, it won't matter, because if their production is doing well, they don't care. They're propagating in-house. It might not matter. As a nursery, we absolutely have to care, because we can't be selling plants with viroid, right? So we have to, it's a zero tolerance policy. Everything has to get tested anyways. But I think, using your eyeballs, looking at those signs and symptoms, weak branching, small leaf expansion, just general dwarfed plants. In flower, it's more obvious, right? In flower, you'll start to see that kind of discoloration on the flower. limited trichome development, lower yield, lower potency, lower terpenes. That's some of the more severe impacts. So, but yeah, if you can catch it early on in veg, that's a lot better because then you're not wasting time in week 6 realizing that there's nothing you can do about it anyways at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why it's so critical to, if it's expressing itself in veg or early veg, to have that ability to scout and pinpoint that out to start eliminating it. And if you're tracking your plants well enough, you could start tracking where that plant came from, what else might be susceptible, where you could go look next as well. For handling of tools and sanitization of equipment and stuff when it comes to this viroid, this is kind of trumps everything else. So if you're taking care of sanitization on your tools for this viroid, you're probably covering all of the other pathogens that we might be susceptible to as well. So what are some of your favorite chemistries that you use in production and in use during handling plant to plant?
Yeah, I mean, we basically use 2 products for the plant to plant handling, bleach and Virkon. Those are the two tools that are available, I think, on a smaller scale, more readily available for people. The bleach, at minimum, we say 30%. You probably could get away with less, but why bother? It's so cheap. The bleach works great. It's a little hard on the tools, right? It kind of wears your scissors down a bit. But the bleach is, tried and true, proven, works. The Virkon, again, another one that works great. A little easier on the tools, not as readily available like at any store, but that's the other tool that we use from plant to plant. The Virkon is our go-to for our cutting team.
Yeah, I've generally done like 10% bleach, but like you mentioned, it's so cheap. It's really not a factor or a matter of like, oh, this is really going to increase our chemical use here, our cost of our chemical use.
The one important factor with any chemistry, particularly bleach, is that you make a bleach solution, you're going plant to plant, you're changing your scissors out, right? You want to make sure it's soaking in the bleach for a long enough time, but also that bleach is going to be diluting over hours. Let's say even minutes, but let's just say hours, right? So you can't make your bleach solution and use it tomorrow. It's going to be at a different concentration at that time. So you want to use it, get rid of it, replace it. So we always tend to go a little more overage just because for that dilution factor, when you're bringing the tools into there, if there's any plant material getting in there, it could be oxidizing, right? So a little bit overkill doesn't hurt, but also refreshing that chemistry on a regular basis is really important.
So 2 questions. So what contact time do you do as like a minimum or even a maximum for both of these chemistries? And for the Virkon, how are you changing that daily as well, or is there any shelf life on that solution?
We change everything daily. We on our cutting team, our people who are going plant to plant, they have multiple pairs of scissors on them. So, I'd recommend doing a minimum of a minute in the solution. You can get away with less, but again, I think it's better to be a little bit overkill. Our team, they usually have like 10 pairs of scissors on them, so they're going from one to the next. And they don't get back to that other one for many minutes, really. Our next step is we might just have a single pair per plant that the team uses for the whole day, and then we just put all the tools and soak them for longer. That way they don't have to worry about, oh, has that one been in there long enough or whatever. It's just one plant, one scissors, that's it. But I think a minute is a safe. I'm sure there's other literature out there that could get a little more detail with it, but we just think that's a nice minimum.
And what about either wiping or getting the excess off when you pull it out of the solution? So are you going straight to a plant, or do you wipe, or do you dip into fresh water, or is it okay to go and cut a fresh cut off of that plant and have some residual of that disinfectant on there?
Our team doesn't do any wiping or dipping. We just go right to the plant. We have seen
no negative
if that material is wet. If the material is wet with the chemistry, then you're going to get major burning, especially with Virkon. It'll burn the tissue. So I think they allow the scissors to dry on their table before going in. We don't wipe just because that's another point for contamination, right? If you're wiping with the same thing with multiple scissors, so they let them air dry pretty readily and then start cutting.
Fantastic. Back to the bleach. I know there's bleach strips. There's chlorine bleach strips. So I'd be curious just to to see what ppm would is, whatever ratio, and to start implementing a lot more of these super cheap, super fast, chlorine test strips. Like, hey, am I in a ppm range? And take the guessing work out of it, or even take the refreshing of the solution out of it as well. Because if staff could handle chemistry like that less often, well, you just reduce your chances overall for any kind of issues as well. So I'd be curious to
Yep.
see what kind of ppm levels and find test strips to accommodate testing all those solutions.
Yeah, well, that's
Let's
a great
transition into
strategy.
some vegetative plants. Let's transition into some vegetative plants here. Let's talk clones, teens, mother plants. Kind of where things are today, and at a commercial scale operation, providing clones to the California market, providing vegetative stock to the California market. Your point of view on how the market is kind of now for vegetative stock, and what you think is going to happen in the near future.
Yeah, I think, over the last several years, right, we've been selling clones commercially across the state of California. Um, there's a real market there, right? It doesn't make sense for all operators to have their own nursery, especially if you're an outdoor grower. There's a burden of cost that it takes to keep germplasm clean and hardened over winter and ramp up for one round. There's an economic, benefit to nurseries and servicing that specialization for the growers. A big part of our business initially was just clones. We weren't really doing the teens. As a nursery, the margin is much higher for clones. It's just the way the economics work of it. But every year, every month, we always had this demand for teens, right? And a teen can mean a variety of things, anywhere from a 4-inch pod up to a ready to flip 2-gallon, 3-gallon. People want bigger pots, whatever. That can mean a lot, but there's a demand for teens. And there's a system that people are using where they have no veg, they bring plants into their production and they flip. And instead of using 20%, let's just say really efficient operators maybe use 13 to 15% of their facility as veg, including moms, clones, and teens or whatever, anything vegetative. But most people are using anywhere from 20 to 30% of their canopy as veg. And what if that 30% was now more grams of weed produced per year out of your facility, right? If you're focused on selling flour or flour products, that's how you're making your money. You're not making your money on the veg. That's just something that's going into your model, right? So we have kind of a tool that we use with some of our customers that kind of analyzes, okay, here's the price of the plants to you. Here's how much you're selling your flour for. Here's how many pounds you can get. Here's how much more weed you can get going to ready to flip teens. And there's numbers that pencil where everybody makes more money. And so I think a lot of people who have high overhead, indoor facilities, high-end light assist facilities, they've made the choice to go to teens so they can get more grams of weed out of their facility every year and not spend so much time vegging. So that's where we said, hey,
That's
let's open up a
fantastic,
whole
man.
new facility that we just do teens at. That's the focus. We take plants from the clone to a custom teen spec. We have kind of our general SKUs that are most common, anywhere from a 4-inch pot, 1 gallon, 2 gallon. But we can offer custom pot sizes, substrates, stuff like that. And we just really specialize in vegetative plant production.
That's fantastic. What about seeds? Where are seeds at in the industry nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, seeds, from what we are seeing, every year, an increase in the demand and utilization of seeds in production facilities, largely centered in outdoor and greenhouse, hoop house, but mostly outdoor productions. I think the indoor model hasn't transitioned into seed as much. We do see some new markets where people indoors are like, hey, I want to grow some autoflower indoor on a commercial scale. And usually I try to talk them out of it because I think there's better models, but there is some demand for it. And the reason why there's not more demand for seed is because people are used to seeds being pheno-hunting, right? Where you pop 10, 100 seeds and they're all different and you can't bag them together. It's a pheno-hunt, right? And that doesn't suit for commercial, flower production and selling 50 packs or whatever people want to sell. And so they go to clones because they know every plant's identical. It's going to be consistent. And so for us, the future of our business and seed is to say, hey, what if you could have 5,000 lemon cherry gelato seeds or your favorite strain here from seed that you grow out and all the plants look the same. They look like clones, but grown from seed. We all know, everybody who's grown from seed knows that the vigor is unmatched. From a pest just perspective, you're not going to be starting with any risk of mites or pests like that. With the right protocols, viruses can be eradicated as well through seed. And there's just less cost. Seed is cheaper to produce than clones by a lot. And so your margins as a producer can go up. But it's yet to see this on a mass scale because the uniformity from seed isn't there. And so a lot of our research and some of our initial trials in 2022, we were able to showcase varieties from seed that showed above 90%, above 95 in some cases, percent uniformity plant to plant at scale. And for us, that's kind of a big game changer in the industry to say, hey, you can grow from seed in a uniform fashion and lower your cost of production and increase your yields. And, we all want that.
Yeah, that's what's going to keep businesses around and keep the next generation going there. So that's huge. That's fantastic. So that was all fantastic information, man. I think there's a lot of good tidbits in there. Knowledge and value that people could gain from listening to this from today. But we're gonna get a little big picture here. So factoring in technology, factoring in the global economy and politics around the world, what do you think the future of cannabis nurseries looks like? Factoring all those things.
Yeah, that's definitely a big picture. It's crazy. Gas prices go up, food prices go up, all the cost of farming, of growing, all that's going up, but the weed prices are going down. One of the only things that's going down in price is weed because of supply and demand, right? Oversupply, which has made it extremely hard for everybody in the space nationwide. Some isolated state markets, because there's less supply, the prices have held. But as we know, especially on the whole West Coast and in California, the price has been rough. People are really struggling, and the cost of everything went up. So it's been really hard. I think due to the last couple of years of that, we're starting to see a little bit of a correction / adjustment in supply and demand where, at least in the last few weeks, especially, I've noticed people are seeing prices come up a little bit. I think that is just to do with supply and demand of how much weed's on the market, of good weed on the market. We know there's a lot of lows and a lot of stuff out there that nobody really wants anyways, but still kind of sells. But there's the demand for good weed is picking up, and the prices are starting to reflect that a little bit, which is good news. In retrospect to the macro economy and what's going on, because the economy is in a pseudo recession right now. Big money into cannabis has obviously slowed down. I think as time progresses, the economy at some point will shift. More money will start to flow back in. I think the bigger companies, the MSOs of the world, are going to continue to step forward, in their fashion and kind of exert their dominance on the market. But a lot of these big guys are just as susceptible to all the challenges that the smaller guys are too. And the big trees fall hard, and doesn't mean that all the big guys are just going to take over. I think it's being able to have a scale that works for your operation, that you can grow the best product in your category, in your tier. There's a lot of opportunity for people of all sizes to still make money. You have to control your costs. You have to be very lean and operate in a certain way right now to stay alive, to just pay the bills, cover payroll. But it's important to not lose sight of what your goals are, of your mission, what you're trying to produce, who you're trying to support, and stay to that. But adopt what's going on. Don't ignore the macro economy and what's happening around you, because if you will, then you'll fail. And businesses
absolutely.
fail all the time. It happens, right? No one's insulated from it. So I think it's critical to always look at your business, no matter how big or how small, and get with the times. Don't ignore the times. I don't know. I can't foretell the future, but I can say that it's best to plan, prepare for the worst, right? And you'll hopefully at some point rise above that and continue to operate.
And then let that be a memory, a far gone memory, right? Where you just made it through the tough times, and ideally the industry gets to a point where everybody's truly flourishing, and doing the best that they can as well. Great insight today, Elan. That was, a fantastic episode of Clone Talk. So where can the audience learn more about you and about Refined Genetics?
Yeah, you can find out about us on our Instagram at Refined Genetics, also our website, refinedgenetics.co. Those are the best places to kind of get a hold of us. You can contact us through either channel. If you're a home grower, small scale, we will be doing some retail drops around the state. Each year we kind of dabble in it a little bit, but we're hoping to make a little more of a splash this year. Some unique exclusive varieties that are kind of only on a real small scale, really elite. For commercial cultivators, we have availability lined up from spring through fall. We're here to communicate with folks, and there's kind of no project that we won't at least entertain. We want to support everybody through these times, and provide solutions that are a win-win for everyone. So definitely reach out to us. If you're interested in our new varieties, our new projects, follow us, hit us up on the website.
Awesome. Hell yeah. Well, that's going to do it for today's episode. I hope all the audience gained some value and some real crucial insight on the industry, from your point of view, which is an excellent point of view. Thank you for everybody for listening today. Thank you to you, Elan, for joining us. And for everybody listening, if you're ready to make the best clones ever, then head on over to clonecoach.com, where I offer expert guidance and step-by-step instructions for both mother plants and clones for your operation. And that'll do it for today. Thank you, everybody. Catch you on the next one. Attention licensed operators in California. Are you looking for high-quality nursery stock? Look no further than Refined Genetics. They provide top-notch clones, teens, and seeds to ensure the success of your operation. No order is too big. For a limited time, use discount code CloneCoach for 10% off your first order. Don't miss out on this opportunity to secure a solid nursery partner. Contact sales@refinedgenetics.co. And yes, it's .co, not .com. Catch you on the next episode of Clone Talk. Do you want to be a guest on Clone Talk? It's easy. Just send me an email. heyclonecoach@gmail.com. We'll get you all set up. I look forward to having you on the next episode.